And we're good.
And anytime you want to start, no, it's good.
So Judy, I'm just going to talk you through what we're going to do. So this first little interview is going to be about the work itself, with the idea that those folks that are listening to this have never experienced it, probably won't get their hands on it at all, and they won't know what the artifact looks like. In some cases, won't even know what a floppy means.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to pretend that it's a very unknowledgeable audience, and I'm going to be asking some very kind of fundamental questions. I got my hair in my eye. That may seem goofy, but we have to think that this is actually not for us.
Okay.
Right? So I want to start with just the basic question. You've got a wonderful piece about Uncle Roger. There's 3 works involved in Uncle Roger, right? Party at Woodside, Blue Notebook, and Terminal.
Yes.
And this Pathfinders project is looking specifically at Blue Notebook.
Yes.
But it makes no sense to just talk about that today without contextualizing
No,
it.
yeah.
So will you please start by, talking about the large project of Uncle Roger, and then how these 3 pieces fit, and then what Blue Notebook means as a separate entity.
Okay, that's a tall order.
Yeah, it'll take a few minutes.
But how far back do you want me to go?
Well, just think in terms of the work itself. So, what was the kind of the impetus to create a work called Uncle Roger, and the way you conceptualized 3 pieces. I know that serial publication, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Just kind of go through that historical piece.
Okay, I was invited onto our Common Electronic Network in 1986 by an old friend of mine, Carl Leffler, who was a video and performance art curator, and he was very closely involved with Canadian artists and Canadian art spaces, and had seen the importance of online communication through working with Bill Bartlett, who was involved with Art Text, and he himself earlier had worked with Willoughby Sharp and Liza Beer and Sharon Grace on the Send Receive project, which was a project that involved sending images back and forth between California and New York City, or between New York City and California, depending on which node you are at. And Carl had the idea of actually starting a art space online that had interactive communication, but in addition to interactive communication, it also would have a menu with interactive artworks, and they switched publishing Artcom magazine into an online publication, and they also had a store where they were going to sell artist software, which in fact they did. It was actually a very visionary project for 1986, and they chose the Well because the Well's values fit their own values. And so Carl, in the spring of 1986, talked me into going on, because I had been working at the time on a project called Bad Information that I was computerizing, and he thought I would be a good fit for the project. I had performed in his space before and knew my work. So that was the catalyst for Uncle Roger. Now, I had been working with artist books that trying to create random access narratives and narratives that were non-sequential since 1976, but I had never done specifically what I wanted, mainly because all I could do was create a one-of-a-kind book, and it could not be shown. Here, I'll show you just this, because unfortunately there's no batteries in it, but essentially I created early.
Excuse me,
Did I made a miss? Oh, I knocked the mic on the floor, okay. Uh-oh, here, sorry.
It's okay. We won't be getting any interview if it's on the floor. So.
All right, you have to put it back here. Okay. So I had been creating random access books. You press the button and a different image came up, or something. Oh, this darn thing will come on, right here. Let's see if we can get this to work.
Can I jump in there?
Please help me. Help. Yeah. Wait, that's why. Okay. I don't use these things very often. Okay, are we running now?
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, this is an example of an earlier, I think this is a 1981 book I created, that you push buttons and the images came around. The problem was, actually it was a great work and people liked it, but you could only make one. So I was coming from a little bit the same place Carl was coming from. How can we distribute experimental literature, and in this case, computer-mediated experimental literature? So I went on, I was amazed. I actually it took a little talking on his part because I wasn't used to online communications. I had to go out and buy a modem. In those days, it was not that easy to set up with a modem. It was slow, you had to figure out, you had to have communication software, you had to integrate it with your computer. It was relatively inexpensive because you paid by the minute, relatively expensive rather, you paid by the minute. But I was amazed when I logged on. There was an entire community there. There were people talking to each other on what we would now call social media. There were conversations back and forth, it was text-based. But people were talking to each other. Other artists became involved. Like Jim Rosenberg was an early member, and we talked about art software. All of a sudden, there was this online community that, in Carl's vision, was also an audience. And so I started doing a bad information